So welcome everyone to LinkedIn Live, hosted by Onalytica. This session, first of all, Happy New Year to you all. This session is talking about environmental sustainability, why it is important and how can brands make a difference. I'm the CEO of Onalytica. We provide influencer marketing and advocacy software to connect brands with influential experts. And we have three wonderful influential experts today on the topic of sustainability. We have Sally Eaves, the CTO and Senior Policy Advisor at the Global Foundation for Cyber Studies and Research. Sally, or should I say Professor Sally Eaves, has been described as the torchbearer for ethical tech, and she's so passionate about the environment and social impact. So delighted to be joined by Sally. We've also got Craig Bennett, the CEO of the Wildlife Trust. Craig has been described as one of the UK's top environmental campaigners and by The Guardian as the very model of a modern eco-general, and has been listed as one of the UK's top social media CEOs. So a really big voice in the industry. And last but not least, we've got Ophelie Janus, the Senior Communications Manager at Siemens. So Ophelie has been with Siemens for 15 years, and she started working on her first sustainability report 9 years ago. And ever since, the environmental and social impact of companies have been at the very, very close to her heart. So I'm delighted to be joined by three extremely influential experts. And just before I get them to introduce themselves, I want to give you a tiny bit of a background into the stats here. I think everyone is aware, from obviously the recent COP26 event of some of the stats, but based on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's global analysis, that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? The 10 warmest years on record have occurred since 2005, and 7 of the 10 have occurred just since 2014. We're also seeing the amount of future warming that Earth will experience depends on obviously how much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases we emit in coming decades. And today our activity is burning fossil fuels and clearing forests at about 11 billion metric tons of carbon to the atmosphere each year. So more and more brands are introducing sustainability and climate change initiatives, and more than 90% of today's CEOs believe that sustainability is essential to success, but only 60% of the companies are actually adopting or believe that they're adopting sustainability initiatives here. So there's obviously a big knowledge gap and a knowledge to doing gap from the companies. So Onalytica published a report in October looking at 6 months of data in the lead up to COP26, and we analyzed 17.7 million posts around sustainability, climate change, deforestation, and plastics. And we looked at which brands were seen as the leading brands in terms of the perception from consumers, and which brands weren't associated with the conversation at all. So the aim of the report was to highlight the perception of these brands, as well as the top influential voices in the report. So I want to get straight on to introducing the actual panel experts, because they're the real experts talking about this really, really important subject. So starting off with you, Sally, I wonder whether you could say a bit more about yourself and talk about why sustainability is a really important topic to you personally.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. And lovely to be joining the panel today. And hello to everyone, and Happy New Year as well. Great to be here. So yeah, just by a little bit of background, I guess I would say I work across 3 pillars, really. So one would be obviously emerging technology, but also education and social impact. And I've always believed these 3 areas can interweave and support one another. So my background is as CTO, now a more strategic advisor right across the whole range of tech disciplines and how we can bring those together. I'm also a professor, an author, and a speaker, and I host some Tomorrow's Tech Today podcast as well, and that's very much building community and communication around these important themes as well. I'd also say I look at how we look at technology, but all that underpins it to make that a reality as well, and to actualize it with scale. So that's things around culture, and it's things around skills development too. I also host, and going back to your question about why this matters so much, I've got a non-profit. And that's very much all around tech for good. And as part of that, we focus on both sustainability, but also diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think there's a really interesting interplay across these as well. So those are kind of my big drivers around that. For long as I can remember, even being back to a kid doing projects in my local community, sustainability has been right up there. And I've always believed that we can bring these elements together to scale change. So for me, this combination tech, education and impact. They're not siloed, they're not separate. We can integrate them for change. And I believe businesses can do well by doing good effectively. And so a lot of the projects I'm involved in are really the enablement of that and making it reality and giving people the skills, confidence to get involved at the same time.
Great, fantastic, Sally. Thank you so much. Over to you, Craig.
Yeah, well, I'm Chief Exec of the Wildlife Trusts, as you were saying, Tim, and that's really one of the largest sort of federations of nature organisations in the UK. 46 individual wildlife trusts spread right across every part of the UK and the Isle of Man and Alderney as well. Collectively, we're one of the UK's biggest landowners. We have more nature reserves than McDonald's has got restaurants in the UK. In fact, 1,000 more. And we estimate that 60% of the British population live within a 3-mile walk or cycle ride of one of our reserves. Before that, I was Chief Exec at Friends of the Earth in the UK as well. And I've had a long history of environmental campaigning. But I've also actually done a lot of work in executive education and with universities around this whole area of business and sustainability, because it's always really fascinated me. So amongst other things, I'm an honorary professor of sustainability and innovation at Alliance Manchester Business School and a senior associate at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, and a few other things here and there as well to keep me busy, because I've just always found this area very, very interesting. So, and why is sustainability important for me? Well, you know, it always has been, really. I mean, even as a teenager, which is quite a long time ago now, you know, I was really driven by the sense that surely this was a defining question of the 21st century. You know, if humans can't learn to live fairly within environmental limits during this next few decades ahead, then there's every chance, you know, our civilization won't continue. And often sustainability or caring about the environment is, people might think, oh, that's nice, but what a shame it gets in the way of progress. To my mind, it is the next step of human progress. Learning to live fairly within environmental limits is the next step of human progress. And I've not yet met anyone that can tell me what it is if it's not that. According to what the science says, is very clear that where we're heading. So that's the way I look at it. It's just the next step of human progress.
Great. That's obviously extremely profound, and you're obviously a lot of wonderful passion that's coming out already. Ophelie, last but not least, over to you.
Yeah, I can really relate to what you said, Craig. I mean, as a millennial, I'm really driven by purpose, and I think my generation faces the realities of climate change. And I believe it's our responsibility as well to drive change and to have a meaningful impact. And I always felt I had to do my part. So in my mid-20s, I realized that I could do that from the corporate world, that I could actually have an impact and start advocating from inside my company. And, you know, I could reconcile my passion, my purpose, and my job. So I was really, I mean, back then I was working in the energy sector. And yeah, I was already really speaking up about sustainable development, and I was lucky to have a boss who saw my passion and who decided, you know, like to empower me. And I was named pretty early on chairperson of the sustainability task force for a large energy company. And I started driving sustainability reporting across the organization. And I got the chance to work with teams of consultants on, you know, various ESG framework and how we can really monitor the impact of the company. And this was really mind-blowing for me, because I realized that with all those frameworks and reporting, we could actually explain to all this team of engineers and CFOs and boards, what is sustainability? It's more than a word, you know, like it's data. And we were able to produce our first report with 125 KPIs related to sustainability. And for those, you know, who know me, they know I'm obsessed by data, but this is actually where it's coming from, because we were able to make it tangible, to make it trackable, to make it measurable, and year on year to really highlight the evolution of our operations. And we were able to create this language that people could understand within the company. So for me, yeah, that was one of the best experiences. And really, that's how I saw sustainability as a way to reconcile my purpose, finding purpose and, you know, linking my passion with my job.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ophelie. And I just wondered whether I could come to you, Craig, first, just to understand your thoughts on how the debate has changed over the last 18 months. how has the debate changed generally, and also have you seen any differences in social media and how that's changed recently?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is fascinating is it wasn't long ago at all, really, that you still actually had quite a lot of people out there denying that this was even a problem, and or indeed dismissing it. So you've got to think that first of all, you had the sort of the climate deniers, the people that outright just denying it, and indeed some companies would do that, and then they felt that they couldn't do that, so they would dismiss it, which is slightly different. They wouldn't necessarily argue that it wasn't real, but they'd say it's not as important as something else, or you need action here. Then there's been the kind of attempts to kind of say, well, your solutions to this crisis are not right. We need to move slower. We can't get to net zero. We have got to go this way. We've got to be pragmatic about how we do this, by which they mean not do very much. And there's those. That's how the argument sort of evolved. I think one of the things that's been interesting in the last 18 months, and particularly and quite concerning actually, and particularly sort of in the run-up to COP26, is the rhetoric has soared like never before. I mean, we have seen, every company kind of queue up ready to give their pledges to go net zero by a certain date. Pretty much every world leader, every politician will want to say how much they deeply care about the planet and so on. But there's a massive gulf between that rhetoric and reality at the moment. I mean, certainly amongst politicians, but the same is true in parts of the corporate world. And I think, it's good to get the rhetoric right. I'm not going to dismiss that. You need the speeches first, and you need the leaders to say, this is important, we need to do this stuff. And that's often where it kind of starts. But we haven't yet seen the follow through at scale and really embedded yet in the way that lives up to that rhetoric. I mean, phrases we've heard many times over the last 18 months is, this is an emergency. We've got to move fast. That is the most important issue the whole world is facing. In no way are we seeing the action that measuring up to that kind of rhetoric. So there's a long way to go in delivery compared to the words that we're getting at the moment. And I think that has become clearer, unfortunately, in the last 18 months than ever before. Although at least we are in a place where the arguments, the words seem to be right now.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing point. That the kind of knowledge doing gap, is still very, very wide, but there's a general consensus that it's something that's extremely important. Sally, what do you think about the sort of knowledge and doing gap? Like, have you seen that? Have you seen that to be especially wide, or do you think we're closing it and making progress?
I think we are making progress. I think part of that, we can see it in different ways. So I totally take on board the comments right now. I think they're really, really important. But I think we're starting to move past that, partly because I think consumers are getting more conscious and more aware and more able to make comparisons between what different organizations are saying, for example. I think one of the other things is some of the conversations about sustainability. If we go back 18, 20 months, they were more around the edge. Now they're truly being embedded and they're front and center. Whether it's a keynote speech at an event, whether it's around some of the reporting that's coming out, but they're getting better. People are looking for more tangibles. They can make comparisons between them. They're asking better questions. I think things around some of the data literacy we talked about in a previous conversation, Tim comes into that a little bit as well. So this embedding, I think, is a really important point. People are expecting more, they're demanding more, and they want it to be backed up. So it's not just talking about what actions are going to be done, it's backing that up with clear commitment, but also with accountability. That's always the next stage with things like this as well. I think we're starting to see it through some of the surveys as well. What consumers are looking for in brands. There's a new resonance around, for example, it's not just the quality of the product or the service or the experience, it's the purpose and the values that a brand represents. And there's evidence as well that things like, brand love, for example, people are more prepared to walk away if you haven't got that values alignment there. And once organizations are seeing that, again, that's a massive driver for innovation. So I think that's important. But also seeing from some of my conversations with CPOs and CIOs as well, a link between tech roles and sustainability outcomes, and showing they've actually got a real responsibility and impact and can make a difference and have agency in those roles as well. And that, I think, is also important to make change happen. So I think research is backing it up. We've got changing expectations and behaviours. And so if those sources of innovation are coming direct from consumers or stakeholder partners, that is a new source to make change happen, not just something that's mandated from government, for example. I think that's helping to create these new vectors of change.
Brilliant, thanks. Ophelie, would you like to sort of comment on what you've heard from Craig and Sally?
Yeah, I agree with what they highlighted. I can definitely see that there's more intensity to the debate, to the conversation, and that we're also moving really like from conversations to sometimes as well regulation, new frameworks, but as well sometimes to action. We have seen recently actions again against greenwashing. Brands are being called off. Brands are being fined. There was in Italy a couple months ago an energy company that has been fined for greenwashing. This is a huge move. I think the fact that you cannot just market your product or your solution as green, and people, I mean, we have seen that people are more aware and more educated about what is sustainability, and I think this is extremely positive. We've also seen that a major oil and gas company has been ordered by a court to reduce its CO2 emission. I mean, this is a major move as well. So I think we are definitely headed in the right direction, but that more and more needs to be done, and that will need more bold and courageous leaders to drive that change.
Yeah, no. So Craig, would you? I accept what you're saying just at the beginning, that obviously your time is pressing. But is it a case of these things take time, but we don't feel like we have time? And all the accountability, the education, you're measuring it, and following on from the words to take action, and for people to kind of understand what that is data literacy and things like that. Is this just, it's going to take 12 months or so to really kind of make the changes that you want to see, or do you feel like just more needs to be done straight away, and people are trying to ignore the issue still?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what I think is an interesting, there's always been a huge challenge in this area around sustainability. And in some respects, it's kind of unique to a lot of the sort of, in the history of social change, if you like, is you can absolutely make an argument that we've made faster progress on this agenda than on almost any other social change agenda over the last, 3-4 decades. I mean, the modern environmental movement in many respects was really born in the early 1970s after the first moon landings, and the pictures of Earth sort of reframed the way from space, reframed the way people think about sort of the sense that we've got to live fairly on one planet. And in that period of time, you can argue we've made very fast progress. And you can argue that in the business community, there's been quite a lot of transformation over the last 10, 20 years around this agenda. The problem is, and this is how it's different to so many other issues, is that on this agenda, there is a ticking clock, and it's going in the opposite direction, which is that, what really matters is not whether we're doing better than we've done in the past. What really matters is whether we're doing enough to meet those sort of hard environmental limits and those environmental trends. And we're nowhere near on that. I mean, just looking at the news today, 2 bits of news I saw today was that new figures for oil production in the US are out today, and they're the highest that they've ever been. So despite all the kind of commitments from Biden and from American companies to move away from oil and all of these kind of things, actually what's really happening is the US is pumping more oil today than it ever has. And emissions are higher now than they've ever been, and they haven't fallen yet. And that's what really matters. And so I think what you have to do on these issues is hold lots of contradictory things in your head all at the same time, because it is all a bit contradictory. We are making lots of progress in some areas, but also things are still going in the wrong direction. And those we can't deny either bits of that agenda. We have to go much faster. We have to really make sure that it starts to bend the curve on these trends and things. We're all humans. People will need time to get their head around this, to learn the skills, to learn the techniques and so on, to embed change. Change in organizations doesn't happen overnight. I know that. But we have to be honest, we're not moving fast enough at the moment. So we've got to move a lot faster, despite lots of good efforts and lots of good people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said. That sort of holding contradictory arguments in your head, because I couldn't agree more. It's such a massive topic, and obviously you've mentioned government. You know, it's really important for them to act, not to make those big speeches. And obviously, you're talking about the fines that they're now administrating on some energy companies. I'd love to switch to what brands can be doing to be more sustainable. Obviously, you work for Siemens. You don't have to talk directly about Siemens. It can be just in general. But what can brands be doing to be more sustainable? You talked about your 125 metrics, measurement with a report. I'd love to get your take on how brands can make a difference, be they big or large or small brands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the role of the private sector in some developing markets, they represent up to 60% of the GDP, 90% of jobs. So their impact can be enormous. So, I mean, there are so many things that they could do, like looking at supply chain and purpose and whatsoever. But I'm going to look at 2 points specifically, which I believe matter a lot. So first, it's establishing the right reporting framework when it comes to ESG, so that it's comparable, trackable, measurable, that's clear and transparent for the general public, for your customer, for the consumers, whatever business you're in. So I think that's really a prerequisite, like your license to operate, having a reporting framework and reporting on those targets after whether it's up to, there are different level of reporting. And I think if we can, reach an agreement where we would all have a standardized reporting framework, we would already be in a much stronger position, but that's in an ideal world. So first, for corporation, definitely adopting, if you haven't done already, a reporting framework. There are many of them out there that are hugely recognized, proven, like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, GRI, many others, the one that is good for your industry. And recently at Siemens, we have also launched a new one. It's this 360-degree ESG framework that we called Degree, and it is really catering to all our stakeholders and ultimately to the planet as well. So it's capturing all the interactions and transformation within the ecosystem and ensuring that we are able to highlight and oversee the whole impact. So every letter in Degree in our ESG framework relates to a specific dimension that matters to us as a company. So it starts obviously with decarbonization and ethics and governance and resource efficiency, employability, and many other elements. And I think having this common ground and being able as well to highlight it internally, to explain it to your employees, is a huge way as well to drive sustainability forward and make sure that this, you're really able to highlight how important it is. And for us with Siemens, it's all about technology with purpose. So this is something that we translate through that framework. The other element, which I think is really important for corporations, for brands, is also to some extent to be able to link compensation with ESG targets. So there are many ways of doing that. We've been pioneering with Siemens as well in that space when it comes to executive bonuses, and it's linked to actually 3 elements. So obviously CO2 target reductions, but as well, it doesn't stop there. It's more than that. It's also linked to learning hours, because this is also about cultivating a growth mindset within the organization, educating your teams, your people, and whatnot, and as well NPS, the Net Promoter Score. That's a relationship and impact with the customer. So you need to capture all those 3 dimensions to be able really to progress and to bring sustainability forward together with your purpose. So I would say those are the 2 main elements, but there are many, many other aspects as well that brands could cover.
Sure. No, it's a big question. Those are 2 wonderful points. Thank you for that. Sally, what do you think about what brands can do to be more sustainable?
Yeah, great question. So one example with Siemens actually that came out of COP26 was the Clean Air Alliance. I think that's a fantastic one because it really shows how organisations, sometimes that might have been competitive in the past, can come together for a shared goal. So that was one I definitely wanted to mention. I think that's fantastic. Another one, and again, collaboration, is Pathfinder. This is a way to do safe data exchange across different partners. There's around 35 involved in that at the moment, IBM being one of the founders there. And again, this kind of co-creation, collaboration, data sharing sharing is really huge to get past some of the sticking points and to really, turn data volume to data value. So I think that's hugely important as well. I'd also say using your sphere of influence. So for the example there about KPIs and linking that to remuneration at C-suite, I think it's a great one. I think we can do the same thing about who we're partnering with in the ecosystem as well, embedding these types of values in terms of almost making it kind of a rite of passage for partnership, if you know what I mean, across the supply chain. I think that's a really interesting one as well. Also linking community action with your vision and mission. So as an example, e-waste is a huge problem. Organizations like Dell have turned that to an opportunity, partnering with a bleeding edge startup, converting something that's a negative, so pollution, for example, and soot from diesel exhaust, using it to convert it to packaging, reducing costs and reducing pollution at the same time. So there's lots of pragmatic things we can do, but also inspiring people, frankly, as well, and putting technology to good use. So Mayflower Project. I was looking at that at CES very recently, and it's a combination of organizations like Marine AI, ProMare, and IBM using technology, the latest emergent technologies, bringing them together, taking literally an autonomous vehicle to sea, using that to do research about microplastics as one example, but at the same time inspiring the next generation of young tech talent as well to say, hey, do you know what, I could do that. So again, a link between sustainability and inclusion in that particular one. So I think it's all around finding right ways to make a difference that relates to your brand mission, communicating that, getting your audience involved in it as well. But yeah, it's tech as a force for good and making sure that measurement's in place is absolutely huge. And we're seeing a lot of great sustainability reports out there at the moment. But what I like to see is when it goes really granular and when you can benchmark where that came from. So I recommend Geotab as an example of that. It really shows, going back to 2019, where the data came from. So it's a real opportunity to help you do that in the right way so that it's tangible, it's transparent, and it doesn't just make a commitment in words. It's actually accountable, and you're actually sharing where there is a challenge along the way as well, because people want to see that. That's what builds trust.
Yeah, I think all of these examples are truly inspiring. And I love the educational aspect and getting all the sort of new talent, really sort of keyed into this and feeling connected with the brand story. Craig, what do you think are the biggest challenges that brands face with trying to be more sustainable? You've obviously talked about governments making really big speeches, but then sometimes there's not too much action. Do you feel like your brands are wanting to be more sustainable, or feeling like they have to, and what are the biggest challenges to them trying to actually become far more sustainable in the longer term?
Well, I've over the years, I've sort of boiled it down to 7 kind of questions that I think all brands need to think about if you really, really genuinely want to be sustainable. And the preface to that is that if it's about is it about being sustainable? Is it being a bit less harmful than perhaps in the past? And I think that's the big first of a mind shift to think about. Is this about reducing the negative impacts a little bit, or is it about overall having a positive impact on people and the environment? And if it's the latter, which of course it should be to be truly sustainable, I would say they've got to think about that across 7 kind of key areas. The most obvious one is business operations, and that's where so many organizations start. How do we reduce the negative impacts of our business operations? But again, how do you turn that into positive? How can you make sure that overall your business operations are having a net positive impact on people and environment, not just a little bit worse off? Products and services, how can you actually make sure that your products are net positive, actually contributing to society, contributing to the environment as well, and of course all the way through those supply chains as well. Echoing some of the things that Sally was just saying there, what about staff training, recruitment, engagement, and rewards? How many companies are actually offering bonuses for staff on sustainability performance at the moment? I mean, some do. I know of some that do, and I know a handful of chief execs of big companies that get bonuses related to sustainability performance, but sadly it's a precious few really at the moment. And that, if we're really serious about it, actually it should be the number one thing that we're giving rewards and bonuses about training. There's no doubt that when you work for a business, you'll get your training in health and safety because it's incredibly important. But what about the training on sustainability matters as well? Hugely important. The fourth is, of course, getting the metrics right, the knowledge management and reporting. Again, this is so often where a lot of the sustainability professionals, I think, get a bit stuck, and it becomes I've often seen it become an end in its own right. I mean, it's very important, but it only should be as a tool for delivering particular outcomes and comparability. But it is important to get it right. The fifth, I would say, is around communications, around honesty in communications and stakeholder engagement, both internal communications within the company and externally as well, and really good stakeholder and community engagement around that whole area of business operations, products, services, and so on. That's crucially important, and being honest and putting hands up when companies get things wrong, because everyone will from time to time. And you can always spot the companies that are serious about this gender when they're honest about the mistakes they've made and they want to learn from it. But then the last two are arguably perhaps the most important for me. One, which is interaction with public policy. I mean, Sally said again, use your sphere of influence. But if we really believe that what's needed to transform to a sustainable society is system change, and this is the language that we've heard from plenty of politicians and businesses over the last few years, it's not just going to be done through companies acting on their own or just through consumer choices. We are going to need big changes to the way our world economy is wired. And that's only going to come about if business is out there leading the charge for that changing and rewiring the economy. So let's see some really responsible, transparent lobbying from business for these big system changes in the global economy that are needed. And we've seen that through initiatives like the Corporate Leaders Group, through We Mean Business, through lots of kind of positive approaches to changing that. But it's still, I think it's an area where we need to see a lot more maturity from business around how it engage in public policy in a truly transformative and positive way that links to sustainability agenda. And finally, we know we talk about it a lot now, but purpose. What's the purpose of your business ultimately? What's your business model, your business strategy? Is it fully aligned with a role in a sustainable world? And if it's not, your company's not going to be sustainable. So those are just, I think, 7 headings that I think are really, really important for every company that wants to be serious about this agenda to think deeply about and to measure progress on.
I love that. I love that last point about the purpose, and I wanted to pick up on that and sort of move to social media and also the presence of sort of influencers and experts, in this particular field. I mean, all 3 of you are very influential on the topic of environmental sustainability. Sally is a quite often an external influencer for tech brands, and obviously Ophelie working for a tech brand, and Craig, you're CEO of a nature charity, environmental charity. And so what do you think, Ophelie, how important do you think it is for execs and subject matter experts and people like yourself to be on social media talking about this and galvanizing the whole debate?
You're talking to a millennial again. We love online activism, so that's kind of what we do. I think it's super important because it's about connecting the dots, about bringing all the ecosystems together, shedding lights maybe on specific technologies, and bringing to light what some companies are doing, some best practices, educating people around us. I educate myself as well via social media. So it's hugely important, and social media is a great platform to do that. But it's just one platform, one way. I think there are many others, but definitely a very influential one.
Great. And Craig, you were one of the UK's top social media CEOs. What kind of effect have you seen from your presence on social media, from employees joining your organization through to conversations and outcomes that have just happened as a result of you being present?
Oh, I mean, I think I find it hard to imagine now how I ever did my job before social media, if I'm honest, or how anyone else did it, and I suppose I'm old enough that I've had a bit of working life before it existed and a lot of working life since. So I can kind of make the comparisons. But, when I first started as a professional environmental campaigner in the late 1990s, believe it or not, we would still sort of send press releases to journalists by fax, for example. I mean, it just seems so quaint now, doesn't it? And, we would get very excited in a campaign team when we had a database, by which I mean an Excel spreadsheet of a few thousand people on it that we might, send a mailing update to once every 3 months or something, about a campaign. And that just seems so ridiculous now in comparison to how we're sort of always on and always engaging external audiences now. And it's two-way, of course. It's not just about broadcast. It's about conversation. It's about discussion and debate and learning from others and so on. And that's so hugely important. And now, of course, I can tweet or put a message on LinkedIn, and immediately it goes to tens of thousands of people, and immediately I get engagement and reaction, and people tell me I'm right, or they might say something else. And but actually, it's quite a good test as well. It's a way that I test out messaging, and I see which kind of messaging lands or doesn't land before maybe I use it in more traditional broadcast media, and in TV and radio interviews and so on. But I mean, even just in that interaction with media now, is that, I mean, this has probably been happening for 10 years now, but rather than having to negotiate a press release internally and stick it out on a fax machine to the press, I can find now I will tweet instantly what I think about something, and I have plenty of national journalists follow me, and sometimes a tweet that I've made becomes a story in a national newspaper. It's just so much faster and so much more exciting, and you feel really connected with people and so on. Yes, of course, there's all the sort of downsides and unfortunate aspects around social media as well, which we're all familiar with, and you've got to manage and be very careful of. And I certainly have periods of the year when I detox and go offline, once or two for my summer holiday, and around normally a week around Christmas and so on. I pretty much switch off entirely. I think that's an important thing to do. But I can't imagine how I'd do my job otherwise these days.
Yeah, it's changed so much, hasn't it? It's amazing. And Sally, if a tech brand or any particular brand came to you, wanted to contract your services as an external influential expert and wanted to run a campaign or program on sustainability, what would be the most inspiring sort of campaign or initiative for you to get involved in?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a lovely one. And in fact, there's one I'm involved at the moment, going back to the Mayflower ship, for example. That for me brings together those three pillars I did in the introduction. We've got the latest and emergent technology coming together and integrating. You've got education, inspiration, curiosity. And as a result of that, I'm already hearing of people who are reaching out to an organization saying, do you know what, there's a values alignment there. That's the sort of place I actually want to work for. So it's not even just around products and services, that talent onboarding, for example, as well, because people are looking for that values alignment. So yeah, I love projects where you can bring together the latest in technology, education, inspiration, curiosity, and genuine social impact commitment as well. That's, it's genuinely authentic. So yeah, I love projects where you can bring those three things together. And you're showing, going back to some of the points so far, you're building community around a theme that really people care about so much. We've all had time to reflect over the last couple of years. Let's use social media as a power, as an influence, that sphere of influence I mentioned earlier. Let's use that in the right way to build community around this, bring people together, show you're actively listening, and scale these projects very genuinely and be very transparent. It's these three pillars, again, I said earlier: transparency, commitment, and accountability. And I think this community can be very powerful to do exactly that and respond to people real time, and also show individual employees as well that they have agency to make a difference as well. So this community word, I think, is absolutely key here.
Amazing. No, I think that's I think that would be an amazing initiative to be part of, and I hope you get lots of opportunity, to be able to follow through on that. Ophelie, a lot of people are talking about tech brands in particular, all chasing the sustainability marketing opportunity. What do you think tech brands need to do to differentiate themselves and not be seen as people that are kind of ticking the box in terms of maybe their content marketing strategy, and rather kind of embedding it as a practice? But also, obviously, that external brand perception is really important on social media when it comes to current and future employees and customers and partners. So obviously that online perception is absolutely key. Absolutely key. What do you think the key sort of strategy should be to be able to come across as really authentic?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think the one way to do that, and it's really beyond the positioning, is really to look inside maybe a bit more, looking at the power of employees, looking at how your employees could potentially become your strongest sustainability advocates. And there is where we could see a shift a little bit as well. And Craig, you mentioned that a little bit, and Sally as well, how we could shift maybe from, like shareholder activism towards more employee activism, because your employee are your most, powerful resource. We're all talking about people-driven organization, and this is where it starts. It starts again with the purpose and how you can really communicate this from within. Educate your employees as well, your people, on sustainability reporting. What is truly our purpose? What do we want to achieve there? Maybe even co-create together. Look at the purpose of specific products. And then, when you're able to do that together as an organization from the start, it will come across more authentic along the way when you bring this product to market or when you talk about it. So I think that's really the shift that we might see with tech brands. It's really, like a stronger focus on employee activism. And this would be a major, major plus for companies, because it will strengthen the sense of belonging, retention as well. You will be able to attract the best talents to your teams. And there, those brands then will come across as ultimately stronger. Results might be stronger as well. And I think that would be a great winning combination.
Great, fantastic. So we got education at the top, we got employee activism, and sustainability in the heart of the business model to be able to drive that change through at every single pillar of the organizations. So I think we're really coming up to time. So I'd just love to get any sort of closing comments on what the outlook is like over the next 12 months. I'd love to get some closing comments from you, Craig, on how you see things evolving, and whether you're positive for how things are going to play out.
Well, again, you're asking for binary answers when I've already said you have to hold lots of things in your head all at the same time. It's very complicated. I'll tell you what I would say is this. If you think, we just had COP26, and I was at COP26, and I found myself reflecting on that even just at the Copenhagen talks in 2009, all the talk then was, can we possibly hold to 2 degrees above warming above pre-industrial levels? And when some of the small island developing states said, no, it's got to be 1.5 degrees, and some of the NGOs said that, people said, you're mad, we'll never achieve that. You're going to bring down the talks and all this kind of stuff. And then at the Paris talks in 2015, there was a lot more of a sort of focus around 1.5, but there was still a debate, is it aspirational and so on. And it's very hard. No one would disagree. It's going to be unbelievably hard. But at Glasgow COP, what happened is everyone completely agreed. We've got to go for 1.5 degrees. And now we're just not debating whether we should or shouldn't. It's how on earth we manage to do that, how we ramp up the pledges to do that. And 15 years ago, we were on course for 6-7 degrees warming in terms of the pledges that governments were making. Now we're on target for still about 3 degrees warming, and that's terrible. We need governments to do a lot more and companies to do a lot more to get us to 1.5. But a certain amount of progress is being made. If you put all that together, what does this mean for companies? I would say we ain't seen nothing yet. The demands for targets will be to tighten and tighten and tighten. Don't anyone think that, we've all agreed net zero by 2050 now and that's where it will end. No, the demands from civil society, from scientists and so on will be that every business has to have net zero target of at least 2040. And by the way, then that won't be good enough, and you have to bring it forward to 2035 and 2030 and so on. Actually, it's going to get tougher and tougher, the demands on business about what's going to be achieved here, because we're still off track from doing what the planet needs us to do. Now, you can find that scary, or you can find that exhilarating and exciting and a massive opportunity, depending what your role is in a company and what your business is and so on. I find it exciting because I think, as I said, this is all about us trying to work out whether this civilization that we happen to be in now, if you can call it that, is actually going to try and achieve the next step of human progress. And what a thing to go for. It's exciting.
Great. No, I totally understand that there's a binary perception, and obviously this is such a grave issue that it's something that progress is not enough. Obviously there's a lot of issues that need to be tackled. So I totally hear what you're saying. Sally, what do you think over the next 12 months? What's your outlook?
Yeah, I'm on the optimistic side, I have to say, and for a number of reasons. It's these different vectors of change, I think, coming together. So on one side, as we just mentioned there's some things around governance. So ISSB, for example, the International Standards Board, they announced at COP26 new standards that will relate to financial markets. So better ESG investment, better measurement side of things we talked about earlier. That's important. Companies themselves are asking for new compliance regulation around sustainability as well to show how they're making a difference. That's important. But consumers are more conscious, employees are more conscious, and getting more agency around these subjects as well. You put all these together, the power of social media communities as well, real time. This is a kind of I don't normally mention this phrase, but just this once, forgive me, tipping point. But we have this tipping point of different vectors coming together that's really kind of changing the narrative about what sustainability look like. It's not this periphery subject. It's not something that's siloed. It's becoming baked in, and we can't just talk about it. We need to have tangible actions that are measurable. They're consistently measurable across companies, and we're starting to see steps forward in this direction. So I think we're really going to the right place. Two really quick things from me. I've got some new research that's on these kind of KPI measurements as well, with my kind of research hat on for a second. That's really, I'm hoping, going to help kind of look at how you do these value relationships between organizations. There's a lot of collaboration around that, and I think it's really going to hope to make those comparisons so you can make educated choices around things around ESG. And I've also got a book called Tech for Good that's all for charity, that's showcasing not just the tech, but people and stories that are making a difference. And I hope that will inspire people to get involved in this industry as well and say, hey, I can make a difference too. So that's completely non-for-profit, but I just want to make a shout about that because it's something I massively care about.
Great, thanks, Sally. And over to you, Ophelie, for the last closing comments on the next 12 months.
Yeah, well, I mean, not that long ago, we've still seen how some CEO were being ousted by, activist investors for trying to make their companies more sustainable. So I hope that we see a big shift from there, that, boards are more sensitive to ESGs, that maybe we can align on some specific metrics, like you mentioned before, Sally, as well. Hopefully as well, I mean, again, in an ideal world, we would also have a cost for carbon. So we could associate as well, like if you really have a cost associated with it, then you can really measure it. You can factor it into decision making at one point. You can, facilitate the transition, the carving out of specific elements as well. So that would definitely facilitate and accelerate the whole transition. So that is something that I wish to see in the coming months. Who knows? But we can all make a difference as well at our own level, and this is why I'm very positive and optimistic, and we all have a chance as well to influence that. So I'm an optimist, and I think we'll see hopefully more and more change, and together we can accelerate the transition.
Great. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Craig, Ophelie, and Sally for coming to speak to us. It's a really inspiring conversation on such an important topic. And what we'll do at Onalytica is keep on analyzing the social media debate to see which brands are coming out with a positive perception. Try to hold brands account, in terms of their online perception, the content they're pushing out, and encourage them to work with influencers and experts to create inspiring content to try and do our bit to push this really important topic. So thank you to everyone who's listening, and really amazing to get three amazing speakers and influential experts in their own right. So thank you to everyone that's listening, and thank you to you three. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.